And
that 76 is a probability-based estimate based on all the seats and the margins. It hasn't factored in any swing in Western Australia. If there's any swing in Western Australia, that number starts to drop and you get a hung parliament.
So it's counting them at what they are, or what they were before the polls opened this morning.
yeah.
And
So this is tight, tight, tight. We'll continue the seat run. We've got some South Australian seats in play. Well, Sturt Labor was hoping that Sturt would be in play, but it's not. This was Christopher Pyne's seat in the inner eastern suburbs of Adelaide. He was on a margin of 0.5%, but not any longer.
He appears to have been in no difficulty in the end. Christopher Pyne is the head there on the first preferences vote, so we've got quite a vote there for the Greens. 10% for the Greens in that eastern parts of Adelaide. When we factor in the preferences and the polling booths, we've got a preference count in roughly half of the electorates, half the booths, 2.2% swing to the Liberal Party. And at this stage, Christopher Pyne back into the Parliament. He's the Liberal education spokesman and opposition leader of business in the House.
The seat of Boothby, and this is the one seat that Labor might still be hoping to get, but they're trailing. This is held by Andrew Southcott on a margin of 2.9% for the Liberals. With 51.6% of the vote counted, there's been a 2% swing for Labor.
Too close to call at this stage. Andrew Southcott is ahead there on the first preference votes. Annabelle Digance, I think it's pronounced, 36.8. Fiona Blinko, 13.8 for the Greens. We're factoring preferences and booths. We've got 19 preference counts in 46 booths, of the 46 booths. A 1.8% swing, that's not quite giving it away. Still in doubt. We've got it leaning towards the Liberals, not quite given away yet at this stage. I think another half hour of counting will decide whether the Liberal Party will hold Boothby or not.
Okay, the seat of Kingston, also in Adelaide's southern suburbs, held by Amanda Rushworth for Labor since 2007.
Sure.
The margin of 4.4%. There's been a big swing to Labor there.
Well, this is a seat where I think it changed members at 5 of the previous 6 elections, and in this election, the margin is completely blown out for the Labor Party. The Liberals only selected a candidate, Chris Zanker, who's a local, he's a detective sergeant in the area, a senior inspector, I think. He was only selected very late and hadn't had much time on the ground. There's a 10% swing to Labor in Kingston. I'm sure Labor would have rather seen some of that swing occur in Boothby or Sturt.
And the seat of Grey, this is the outback of South Australia, held by Rowan Ramsey for the Liberals. He took over that seat at the last election. Margin of 4.4%, but again, this time there's been a big swing to the Liberals.
Of course, the previous seat was previously held by, I was going to say Darryl or Shane Wakeland, but I think they're his nephews. Barry Wakeland was the former member for Grey. He was the former member, retired at the last election, and there was a big swing against the Liberal Party that election. That swing's come right back now, and Rowan Ramsey's established himself in that election. Until 1993, that was a more often than not Labor electorate, but he's drifted well out of the Labor fold, as South Australia's, I think, lost 2 seats in that time.
It's a seat with a huge incumbency advantage of being so big. If you get in that seat, you can stay there.
I can't help but ponder as we sit here looking at this extraordinary situation that's unfolding at where national politics was 8 or 9 months ago, where Kevin Rudd was still Prime Minister for a start. He was still riding incredibly high in the polls, and of course the rest is history. It was just all downhill from there. And Stephen, you must sometimes wake in the middle of the night and break out and sweat at the thought of how Labor has squandered this incredible opportunity.
One thing we do know, I mean, firstly, there are some mistakes that we obviously made which have adversely impacted on us, but there's also much higher degrees of volatility these days. It is a very significant factor. In the old days, you could say, so 40% rusted onto Labor, 40% of the coalition who were fighting for 20. Now, you can probably say there's 30% rusted on to both parties, and you're fighting for 40 in the middle. And volatility, the swings are deep. If the election had been at the end of the first week of the campaign, everyone thought we would have won, and won reasonably comfortably. At the end of the second week, we would have been smashed, because of.
And the big question mark at the top of all of this is, what if you'd waited till October? As I know many in your party were suggesting.
There are very many hypothetical situations you can throw up in the end.
Fascinating ones that we'll never know the answer to now, but
that's right.
I'm sure there'll be people inside your party that will be very intent on asking that question over the next couple of days.
Well, win, lose or draw, I mean, all of those questions will always be asked. For the moment, we're not sure whether it's win, loss or draw. And I think Nick's heading to a draw. I can't. Just another quick count.
With a green balance of power probably in the Senate.
Well, I've used this phrase, I'm old-fashioned. Let's worry about the House of Reps first and worry about the
well, I'm thinking as a journalist here.
I must say it's difficult to see Labor finding the 76 seats.
I was just about to say,
that's why I still think it's...
I've just done another trawl, and I got to 72, and I struggled.
Right.
You know, that's. I'm not saying we'll end up on 72, but you find 55 to 60 very comfortably. You then go through them very carefully, and I get to 72, and I'm then saying, will we win a Hasluck or a Swan? Will we, hang on in a Robinson, etc.? And that's the dilemma that we have.
But equally on your side, Nick.
Given where the politics was at 9 months ago, this is extraordinary. This should have been a cakewalk for the Labor Party to get a second term, and the collapse in Labor's standing in the last 9 months is extraordinary. And I've got to say, a great tribute to Tony Abbott. He's performed exceptionally well.
And another remarkable aspect of that is that he got there with 1 vote to spare.
Well, that's right.
And how different it might have been if Malcolm Turnbull had got that vote. And in fact, there was somebody who abstained and there was another absentee. But had he stayed as leader,
and the ETS... Dwyer and Paul Fletcher weren't in Parliament yet.
The ETS would have gone through. And when Labor did go to election, there was one big issue that would have been totally negated because the Liberals could hardly have campaigned against it.
Yeah.
So
well,
an amazing set of circumstances.
But you're right, and the collapse in Kevin Rudd's standing in that period was just phenomenal, and Labor has reaped a whirlwind from what's occurred.
Well, talking about climate change and the emissions trading scheme and all of those things, we're going to take a very quick look at the seat of Melbourne, which is now most likely to be in the hands of the Greens, thanks to a very substantial degree to Labor's climate change policies. And this was Lindsay Tanner's seat. He's retired at the election. He held it with a 4.7% margin. With 39% of the vote counted, Anthony, how does it stand?
This one looks like a safe Green gain at this stage. Lindsay Tanner's
two Canning booths.
Lindsay Tanner's first preference vote was consistently 10% lower than Labor's Senate vote. And on these figures, the Greens are on 36.7. They will go on to win this electorate. There's a 7.6% swing. We are giving this as a Green gain, and Adam Bant is about to become the first Green member elected at a general election. Member of the House of Representatives.
And I've got Adam Bant standing by in Melbourne, but just before we cross to him, I'm going to tantalise you a little because Stephen Smith has got first figures in from Canning in Western Australia. Western Australia could be absolutely pivotal, or will be.
They're both from Canning, where on paper it's not in the ballpark for us, but because of Alana McTiernan, then it is.
Well, so what is the seat now?
It's about 4.4, nearly 4.5 away from us.
Right.
But Carrigallen District Hall, it's a small booth, about 260, a 9% swing to us. And then North Dandalup Primary School, 400 votes, or 350 votes, a swing of 3% to us.
Now, do you read anything into that?
Well, the movement in Canning is our way in those small booths. But Alana's chance is in the big booths in Armidale, where she was the state member and where the Labor vote is. But I think what we will see is a swing to Labor in Canning because of her credentials and standing. The question is, will it be big enough to knock off Don Randall?
OK, now we've had Adam Bant standing patiently by in Melbourne. Adam Bant, how are you feeling right now?
Well, it's a pretty happy feeling here, as you'd imagine. We've run a pretty positive campaign based around some really core values of compassion and sustainability and equality, and the feeling in the room here is pretty amazing.
So, what do you bring it down to? I mean, we've been on cue. We've been speculating tonight that the climate change policies of the government, the U-turn over the ETS, has played absolutely into your hands. I don't imagine you'd dispute that.
Oh, well, look, the government has chosen to delay action on climate change, and the coalition is in denial about it. And we've run a campaign that says that we need to take urgent action. We're facing a climate emergency. The scientists are telling us we've really got 10 years to start to turn it around, and we took that to people in Melbourne, and I think people in Melbourne have responded.
But The irony there, of course, is that you say urgent action needs to be taken to save the planet, but the Greens in the Senate actually voted the ETS down.
Well, we've always been pretty clear that we will support a scheme that is actually going to reduce emissions. One of the things, the case that we made to the electorate was that Labor's CPRS wouldn't have seen emissions reduce until 2035. And I think today people in Melbourne have delivered a pretty resounding verdict on what Labor and Liberal cooked up as their scheme to deal with climate change. And now we're opening up a new chapter where we've got a really exciting prospect in Parliament to take the kind of action that the country and the planet needs.
How different a situation might it have been if Lindsay Tanner had stayed on to contest the seat?
Well, he certainly had significant respect, and I'd be a rich man if I had $1 for every time someone told me that they liked what I stood for, but they thought Lindsay Tanner was good. And he's got, he had quite a strong following, and I respect him as a local member. So it certainly did help, but the against that, there were a number of factors in play. We had Julia Gillard taking over as Prime Minister, and also the potential tightness of the election. So I don't think one can point to any one factor. I mean, we ran a positive campaign based on getting hundreds of volunteers out, door-knocking, leafleting over the best part of a year. And it's great to see that grassroots politics pays off, and I think it's really engaged people in the electorate.
Well, it does look now as if we are heading for a hung parliament. Neither of my panellists from the Liberal and Labor Party can see a clear path to majority government for either of them. In that event, you've made plain that you would support Labor in any issue of who governs. That's correct?
Yeah, look, I've made some statements about that in the past, and I stand by those, but I'm not thinking about that tonight. I mean, we've got the whole electorate, the whole country result to come in yet, and I think over the coming days we'll see what happens, and that'll be the time to think about it. Tonight's the time for us here and all the fantastic supporters who've put in a lot of work over a year to celebrate a really hard-fought and well-earned victory and have a good night celebration.
And we're told that Kevin Rudd is about to make an appearance, but I'll just have one more question for you, and that is, have you heard the possibility that Andrew Wilkie might be joining you in the Parliament for the seat of Denison as an independent, but of course he's a former Green?
Well, the results, from what I've been told, are looking close in a couple of seats in Grainler and perhaps in Denison as well. And that's really exciting that the Green vote is on the rise, and I think increasingly Greens values are now mainstream values, and we're now taking our place in the floor of the National Parliament and the House of Representatives.
Adam Bandt, thanks very much for talking with us, and it's not yet so clear-cut that we can say congratulations, but it looks that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry.
Now, we're going to continue our seat run while we wait, but as I said, it sounds like Kevin Rudd is about to make an appearance in his seat of Griffith. We're going to look at the seat of, and there we've got some pictures, if we can go to those. Can we cut to our pictures of Kevin Rudd? We've got no sound from there yet, but he's about to speak. And as I said, this is a man who's been a part of an amazing saga.
You can talk to him about taking orders.
Allocation preferences.
Eldest son Nicholas is here.
Yep, they're just going through introductions. But we should contemplate the fact that this man took Labor to power in 2007 with one of the biggest swings for Labor in history, a swing of 5.4%. Swept Queensland with swings in some seats of 10%, 12%. He then enjoyed an amazing run of popularity as Prime Minister for much of his 2.5 years in the job, 2 years and 7 or 8 months in the job. Record popularity for some time. Had he been able to sustain that, he could have increased the majority substantially. He's about to speak now.
It's on sale.
No. I'm not quite sure exactly at what stage this is at, and I might just come back to our panel here for a moment while we're waiting, and as soon as it looks like he's about to speak, we'll cross to him. Stephen Smith, you must still have run questions through your mind about what happened. And whether it really should have happened, whether the actions by the Labor Party were premature. Kevin Rudd's about to speak.
If you try to talk in my
Friends,
ear,
one and
I
all.
can't hear you.
Before I make